stop to that here in Missouri. But you also need to pay attention to the other impacts, and specifically I'm speaking of forfeiture. We've got to stop that. That is going to destroy our nation. It's getting worse, it's getting bigger. The way they're paying for their armored vehicles is by stealing money from you and your neighbors. So I'm going to leave it at that and just try and keep it short and sweet. Thank you.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's what forfeiture is. It's stealing. But I want you to know that you're far from the only conservative in this room. Not only is the ACLU the most conservative organization in America, but our executive director, John Payne, is a registered Republican. If we had registration here, he'd be a registered.
Actually, I'm an officer on the party. I'm a committee man on the city of St. Louis.
That's right, and many others. But we're glad to have you here, Pat. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Neil, do you have any thoughts you want to add to what's been said? And then Jeff, and then we'll leave time for questions.
Yeah, I just have one brief comment because I've already said a lot over the past few hours. I just want to focus real quick on marijuana and how great a tool of it is for law enforcement and violating the rights of people. As each and every one of you leave here today, if I were a Kansas City police officer sitting out here somewhere, and as you get in your car and you pull off, and I follow you, and I stop you because I don't know anyone who can drive a mile without doing something wrong with driving a car, violating some simple law. And I stop you, I can search you, your car, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Really, there isn't. Because all I have to say is, I smell marijuana. Whether I do or not. How can you argue against that? And if I, as a trained police officer, I've had this training in the academy, I've arrested over 40 million drug violators in my short career. No, but seriously. But I've made so many drug-related arrests and blah, 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 and I've been trained and I know exactly what marijuana smells like. It smells like it's coming from your car, about your person. Sir, ma'am, please step out. And really, after the fact, there's not anything you can do about it. I might walk up and I might find something. I might find some, as I shake your carpet mat out, I might see some marijuana, what appears to be marijuana, or half of a blunt, or, cigarette, or whatever. Or I may not find anything. But it's just a matter of time of me going through the numbers of stopping people, searching them, whether I smell marijuana or not. And I'm going to find something that's someone has something, whether it's marijuana, whether it's an illegal weapon, or whatever it is. But let me tell you, at the end of the day, the number of times that we in law enforcement search someone in their cars, when you look at the end results, the end numbers of the thousands upon thousands of searches, illegal searches that we conduct across this country every day, we very seldom ever find an illegal gun, someone who's a wanted, felon or whatever. The bottom line is, by ending the prohibition of marijuana, do you have any idea as to how many illegal searches will no longer be taking place across the country by police? Thousands upon thousands upon thousands. It's one of the best things that we can do for your Fourth Amendment right in this country. One of the best things. So I just wanted to touch on that. Again, one of the main reasons for ending marijuana prohibition, because, and I'll say this, policies of decriminalization will not free us from that. Because as a police officer still smelling marijuana, I still have to make a determination as to how much you have. Okay, are you distributing or intending to distribute? So I still have to run you through all of that, searching you in your car until I get to a point to say, okay, you only got one joint, or again, you had nothing. So only through legalization, tax, and regulation can we do that. So just wanted to take that. We'll take questions in a little bit. I want to
spend just a moment here, because we really don't have it on the agenda otherwise, but following up on what Neil's just said, anyone who practices criminal defense law would advise you to do this. If you haven't picked up the little green cards out here on the desk, please make sure to take one of those with you. And I and several other lawyers have spent many years revising that, trying to boil down to the bare essentials what the most critical information is for anyone to know when you have a close encounter with law enforcement. And I think the single number one most important thing is to don't talk. I mean, if it's a traffic stop and you're talking about the traffic violation, the alleged traffic violation, of course, and you're required to show your driver's license. But if it becomes clear that you're being suspected of some behavior beyond a routine traffic violation, the best thing you can do to defend yourself is to clam up, shut up, don't talk. You always have the right to be silent. They don't bestow that right on you when they read your rights to you. You always have that right. They probably won't read your rights to you because they know they can question you first, and then they don't have to give you a Miranda warning until after you've been arrested, and then if they're done questioning you, they still don't have to give you a Miranda warning. Don't count on them to read your rights to you. By the time they do that, you're already arrested. The point is, don't talk, don't confess, don't implicate anybody else, just invoke your right to remain silent and blame it on your lawyer. Say, a lawyer told me to do this and that's why I'm doing it. Don't ever give consent for a search. No matter what excuse, no matter how clear it is that there's a pound sitting on the console, don't give consent to a search because your lawyer may have a way to defend you. There are occasionally arcane arguments that can be made that may still defend you, but if you give consent for a search, if you say okay or I don't mind or anything else that suggests you're giving permission, your lawyer has nothing to work with. Don't ever give permission for a search. Don't, in my opinion, don't invite the police into your home. If there's a knock on the door and you see the police officer, don't open the door. You know, don't ask if he has a search warrant. If he does, that door will open. You don't need to inquire about that. You know, that door will magically just splinter before your very eyes. But you know, don't talk to the police. It's the single most important thing. Keep in mind, anything you put in your garbage is fair game. They don't need a search warrant to search your garbage. And I'll go through it with a fine-tooth comb. If a dog alerts on your garbage, if they find stems, seeds, empty baggies, High Times subscription cards, or anything else that suggests illegal drug use, empty zigzag packs, you know, that will go a long way toward getting them a search warrant. Don't put anything in your garbage that you wouldn't want a judge to see and know about. And if you see a sign on the interstate or any other highway that says drug checkpoint ahead, you will inevitably see an exit right after you see that sign. And they want you to take that exit. That is where the drug checkpoint is. It is not straight ahead. So you have to just grip the wheel, stay in your lane, don't speed, don't change lanes without signaling, and don't litter, because they will get you if anything comes out of that car window. Just keep on driving, and you'll never see any drug checkpoint. So with that, Jeff, what would you like to add to what you said here?
You know, just very briefly, and then we'll for questions. Two things that were raised by sort of the comments that were made. Remember in All the President's Men, Follow the Money? Think about two things to leave with. Follow the money, because it relates to what we're talking about, sort of political battle ahead. Two things, technology and private prisons. How many folks have heard of Correctional Corporation of America, CCA? Two ACLU conferences ago, one of those bizarre, sort of ironic, kind of funny but sad moments, they actually read to us from the opening preface of the Corporations Company of America annual stockholder report. And it said, because of rising crime rates and other issues, this is an ambitious and wonderful time for CCA. So, you know, they want more prisons. They want more crime. And you have to think about, they make their money the more people are in prison. I say that because these are the things we need to be aware of. When we start getting into these political battles, there will be money against us. And we need to know where it's coming from and why. You need to be aware that sometimes, although most of us want to see less folks in prison, there are those who might want to see more folks. The other thing to be aware of is technology. You know, it is stunning when they do the Pew Center or other folks center on the media, First Amendment rights. When you ask young folks things about the First Amendment, if you don't say First Amendment, but you sort of talk about privacy rights, the right to be free from Fourth Amendment, Church and seizure rights, depending upon the way you phrase it, most people do not understand what these rights are about, and they're really willing to give up a lot of privacy. ACLU's concern has a lot to do with technology, drone technology, search technology, internet technology. We're all seeing it now with Snowden and the NSA. The reason I raise it is because there is greater and greater capability, video surveillance cameras, the ability to store data. We need to be aware of those issues. Those directly relate to criminal justice reform. Those directly relate to our privacy. Those directly relate to our ability to be free from governmental interference. So again, one of the reasons ACLU focuses on a broad range of issues is they are interconnected. So I just wanted to raise those two things to you when we talk sort of civil liberties in the police state. Technology and private corporations, for-profit prison issues are something we need to be aware of, and I think we all need to start paying attention to, taking a look at it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, we do have 15 minutes in our schedule for questions at this point, so Miranda?
Jeff, you mentioned the NSA privacy issues. I believe that it was leaked that some of the data that the NSA was collecting was not being used to find terrorists, but it was actually being sent to the DEA. Is there anything that the ACLU has done or can do regarding that?
Yeah, so a lot of the Patriot Act, the various languages, well, there are some problems. We will bring litigation, and we're told that we can't get the information because it implicates state secrets. For example, we brought a case that had to do with the tapping of people's phone lines. We brought people, you know, who had overseas contacts, who had clients who were overseas, said these people have a reasonable belief that their conversations are being taped. And the case was dismissed. They said, well, you can't prove their conversations are being taped. And when we asked for the documents that prove whether they were or not, we were told, well, that's a state secret, you can't have that information. So there is a little bit of a challenge. But yes, unfortunately, the language that is passed is fairly broad, and it has to do with, for example, relating to an investigation. Well, pretty much anything relates to an investigation, so it does get problematic. What we do is there are Inspector General reports. We go through the data, we look at some of the reports that are responsible for filing, and we can then advocate with some members of Congress, both left and right, Libertarian, Democrat, and Republican, who have concerns about overreach. So we try to constantly review the data. We have, working in our Washington Legislative Office, a former FBI agent who is incredibly knowledgeable on these issues, really walks us through the data. And what we try to do is advocate for better policies. What we have said, and it really is sort of stunningly simple in its logic, if your goal is to find a needle in a haystack, you don't find it by building a bigger haystack. And when you talk about careful police investigatory work related to terrorism, related to any crime, just collecting massive amounts of data does not do any good. So we do policy discussions, we review the data, we bring litigation when possible, but I tell you, it's challenging because there's a lot of hoops to jump through.
Right. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, sir?
It sounds like it's kind of like an undernote, but a common theme amongst what everyone's talked about is that like strong local autonomy is like a massive resolve to get anywhere. We have to educate one another. We have to all do all this stuff self-supporting. So how far does that go, and what's its order of precedence? How far we take that autonomy to be self-supporting in our local communities, and how important that is from any of your perspectives? Since up until the point of going to Congress or whoever to say, now this is okay. Now this is okay. But we're just saying, no, it's okay all along. We just have to say it as a collective group long enough for them to write on a piece of paper. So as far as autonomy goes amongst us, and education goes amongst us, where do you see in the order of precedence?
Well, I think it'd be nice to tell the Missouri farmers they could spin this hemp for me. And I think that's an appeal to rural Missouri in terms of local self-determination and control to be able to grow and industrialize what we damn well please do. I don't know if that addresses where you're coming from, but
That's a broad question.
If I may, regarding civil asset forfeiture, you're losing that autonomy with your local police because they're dual swearing officers and they're essentially giving over a significant portion of their loyalty to the federal agency that's giving them the money back. And that's something that you have to put a stop to, or that's going to keep going.
So do you stop through discussions, or do you just stop?
As I understand what you're saying,
Discussion.
you're going to have this discussion in every community before you're going to be able to
We're
get.
ultimately under the threat that our rights are constantly being infringed upon, that we're constantly in this gate like cattle to be
Yes.
subject to this circumstance, and that we just accept it until someone writes off and says,
Well,
"Oh, now
no.
that's not okay."
That's, California is a classic example of what I think you're saying. California has the medical marijuana, however, states were seizing under civil asset forfeiture the buildings that were owned by landlords that had dispensaries in them. Now, last month, the feds dropped a bunch of those seizures and gave back. However, in this past summer, there was another seizure of a building in Berkeley that is still ongoing. Last month, the Supreme Court also heard a case of Whaley's regarding assets that were seized and forfeited prior to their going to trial that prevented them from being able to hire an attorney to defend themselves going to trial. So, there's small steps being made, but you have to keep that pressure up locally if you want to have any upward pressure to politicians. I mean, even letting the judicial system know, we're not really happy with this. Judges decide things on the law, but it would be silly to think they don't pay attention to what's actually going on in the culture around them.
Well, it's apparent that they don't. So,
Tip O'Neill once said, he was Speaker of the House, United States Congress, he once said, all politics is local. So I think Tip O'Neill answered your question. You are absolutely right, it is local. Let me see by raising hands, how many folks have ever gone on a lobby visit? All right, I'm hoping by the time we do this next year, there's no reason that every hand could go up. Let me tell you in like 30 seconds what a lobby visit is. You do not have to see your state or local representative or your US or congressman, congressperson, or senator. Get to know their staffers. Call them up, bring 2 or 3 folks from your community who are registered to vote, bring a piece of paper that has 3 points on it. Tell them what your points are and then ask them, what is the congressman's position, what is the senator's position? You may not change their vote, but you've got a piece of information and they have now seen you. And guess what? 3 of us, and this is a politically active crowd, 3 of us raised our hand. They presume if you have gone to the trouble of scheduling a visit to see them, that there are 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 more people like you. When you hear about these school boards that change, or when they vote for these crazy things like the FCC, you can't say the F word, it's because a small group of people organized, made phone calls, sent letters, and sat in an office. Go there. You might be scared the first time you do it. You might think it's really, actually, I'm an ACLU. It's a lot of fun. And the staffers love meeting you. They are a bunch of folks like me. They're lawyers and politicians. They love talking to people. You will make a relationship, and when it comes time for a crunch bill, and we need lots of people to go in and talk to folks, you will have already done it. Lobby visit. That's the local answer. They have offices right in your hometown. You don't even have to go up to Jeff City. If by this time next year, every one of you has done a lobby visit, I will tell you we'll start changing the tide.
I want to add on to what Jeff said about the fun of politicking. When it comes time to gather signatures for our initiative, that's really the most local type of politics we can have. And if you take the time to do that on your Saturdays, or all week, or whatever you can afford, it's one of the most fun things you can do, to meet people on the streets and reinforce the support and hear their stories. It's really fun.
A bit of history, 20 years ago, doesn't seem that long ago to me, but 20 years ago, Missouri had some of the worst forfeiture laws in the country. And both the Kansas City Star and the St. Louis Post did a great job of exposing some of the worst abuses of those laws that were going on. Back then, if you were even suspected, you didn't even have to be charged, let alone convicted, but if you were suspected of possessing a misdemeanor amount of marijuana or just an empty pipe, that would be sufficient to get your property, your car, often was the property in question, forfeited to the state. Now, since at least, I believe I'm correct, at least since 1945, and I think a lot longer ago than that, our state constitution has said, as Pat pointed out, I believe, that all forfeiture money shall go to education. So when the police do this end run, when they exploit this loophole that was enacted a few years after 1993, they're taking money away from education. That's not a popular thing politically, generally. We should use that argument against them. But in 1993, our legislature responded not only to the press, but to people doing just what Jeff said, going to talk to the legislators and saying, we don't like this, we want this to be changed. And Missouri passed a law which requires that if a forfeiture is going to take place in our state courts, you have to first not only be charged, but convicted. And it has to not just be a misdemeanor, but a felony. And then even after that, the state has the burden of proving that you did either derive this asset from criminal activity or use it in criminal activity, or you were at least intending to use it in criminal activity. So that actually makes our state's forfeiture law one of the best in the country. But this damn loophole was tacked on a few years later, which enables the police to transfer funds. They're supposed to get a judge's approval, but you only have 96 hours from the time the prosecutor files the petition to authorize the transfer. So I hope this is not too technical. It's really not a complicated thing. Think about that, 96 hours from the time the prosecutor files the forfeiture transfer. Well, you don't even have notice typically. The circuit clerk's office needs more than 96 hours typically to get a letter out to you. And they don't send it by, FedEx or anything. Very few people even get a notice that the state's going to transfer their assets to the feds for forfeiture until the 96 hours has passed. Most people assume at that point that they're fucked, that they don't have any recourse, and that's what the law says. But in reality, every time I've gone to court with somebody and said, Judge, this guy didn't even get his notice till after 96 hours, this statute is unconstitutional, throw it out, or deny this petition, deny us the right to contest it so that we can go up on appeal. The judge always says, well, I'm sure you'd like to do that, Mr. Peets, but I'll go ahead and let you argue about it right here. Then they grant the transfer. If we can find a case where a judge denies a hearing because you're past the 96 hours, then we should go to court on that, because it's such a blatant denial of due process. The other point I wanted to mention, I was in a seminar yesterday with the federal court down in Jefferson City, and they reviewed cases from this year's Supreme Court docket. One of the ones that was of most significance to us is Jardines, Florida versus Jardines. And in that case, the question was, can the police take a drug dog up to our doors with no reason to suspect anything? Necessarily, or with or without any suspicion? Can they just walk a drug dog up to your door, and if that dog says, pot in here, can they just then get a search warrant, or march in, but get a search warrant is really the question. And so we won that case, but by the slimmest of margins. It was only by a 5-4 decision that the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. That's a search when you take the dog up there. And it was a close call, because previous cases have said either that a drug dog sniff is not a search and therefore not even subject to the Fourth Amendment, or they've said that since a drug dog is only going to alert to something that no one has any right to possess, ignoring 20 states' legalization of medical use, but nonetheless that no one has a right to possess what this dog sniffs, then that makes it exempt from the Fourth Amendment. Well, thank God 5 out of 9 said no, we're not going to allow that. But we were very close to having that allowed. Right now, it's not clear that a cop could not take a drug dog up to every car on the street. And if the dog alerts, get into that car, because there's a so-called automobile exception. They don't have to get a search warrant. If they have probable cause, they can just bust into your car, and if a drug dog says there's pot in this car, then that's probable cause. So, frankly, the law is not clear yet on that point, and I would hate to see the Supreme Court decide that question. But we do have a couple minutes left if there is. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if in the activist circles, national or national activists like the ACLU have been discussing with the seemingly inevitable legalization of marijuana, either search and seizure, return of property, expungement, or reparations. Is that going to be the next step in activism, do you think, after it becomes legal?
Yeah, reparations would be cool.
I don't know. I mean, what do you all think? Anyone want to comment on that?
I want to see the expunge and release
Yeah.
provision, obviously, for Jeff's sake and others like him.
That's in
As
there.
far as asking for reparations, I don't know if we're right for that question yet.
It's not a question of whether we'd like to, but whether politically that would keep us from passing the measure. I think that's the way we look at it. Yes, Tricia?
Someone asked this question earlier, and I think that Jeff will probably have a pretty decent answer to, about judges and prosecutors staff in TCA. Is that ethical? What is the?
Yeah, so there was a case a few years back, I don't know if you remember, in Pennsylvania, where there was a judge, all the juvenile cases were going to him and he was sending them off and he actually was getting kickbacks for each one. So yeah, that would be a conflict. I mean, if somebody had stock, I think that would clearly be a conflict. That would be something I think we'd look into. We'd hope that the judicial review boards in any state would. I will tell you, it was interesting. We did a review of the contract of the private prison corporation in Alaska, and it was so bad that they actually had to give money back to the state. That's how much they were violating the terms. They significantly understaff. Our affiliate in Idaho, I'm really very pleased to report, just a week or two ago, our affiliate in Idaho got CCA kicked out of the state. So we may be turning the tide, but again, we have to pay attention to those things because there's a lot of money to be made in these. And these are people who want to make money and they don't care about justice or what's right or what's better for our society.
CCA runs the big prison right over in Leavenworth, not the U.S. penitentiary, but the big holding facility right next to the U.S. penitentiary in Leavenworth. And I had clients in Missouri courts who are held over there in CCA's tender mercy. Yes, ma'am?
I know a little bit of a segue, but the medical treatment of people, isn't that enough? My understanding is that it's very, very bad with CCA. It's almost non-existent, that people are dying. I think 36 in one state last year died from medical neglect. Does this have nothing to do with the constitutional right to?
Well, it does. It certainly does at some point. Of course, they're going to the lowest bidder to provide alleged medical care, and all prisons and jails are terrible about that. But Jeff, again, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, I mean, you're right. The numbers are really bad. Oddly, because of the rising costs of medical care, because of the aging population, because of the long sentences, we are seeing departments of corrections around the country that are actually beginning to look at not sympathetic release, but medical release. And so we're seeing some, I mean, it's kind of ironic that they're doing the right thing to save money, and they're actually harming people who are then having trouble getting medical care. But we're looking at it. There's a national project at ACLU that's looking at these issues, and yeah, I think you're going to continue to see more work related. There is stunning under-treatment both in medical care and mental health care.
They're dumping old men on the streets in Kansas City with one day's medication, and they're changing underwear, and they get them to die. So
It's horrible. Believe me, it's heartbreaking. Yeah.
What's the best way to get involved if you're on the Kansas side? Just go over to state.
Yeah, so the ACLU of Kansas and the ACLU of Missouri are both right over here on Main Street. Deb, do you have our 816 number?
816-470-9933.
Give us a call. Go to our website, www.aclu-mo.org. If you're on the Kansas side, we'll connect you up with the Kansas affiliate. One thing I'm very proud about being affiliated with the ACLU, we are incredibly cooperative. You saw Allison is here, both at the national level and affiliate state to state. All of the executive directors of each of the organizations to get together every year. We're all good friends. So we will connect you up very gladly. They help us, we help them. So we absolutely, we live with our volunteers. So thanks very much. We'll absolutely connect you with them.
Is there another question back there? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was wondering about that legalization and ending a lot of the searches. Wouldn't they still be able to search you and say that they thought they smelled something and you're driving intoxicated or under the influence?
Well, the thing is, without your consent, they need probable cause or a search warrant to search you. Okay, so, I mean, I don't know of any cop who can smell cocaine or, you know, heroin or anything like that. It's unfortunately that, you know, marijuana is very noticeable. You know, if you've been smoking it because you burn it, most people burn it to use it. And, you know, there's case law after case law after case law where an officer can acquire and usually does acquire the ability to distinguish burning marijuana from other burning substances. And so therefore, it's just a very good tool for law enforcement to get into your pockets or get into your car or get into your home. And again, you know, whether they smell it or not, I mean, just real quick, anecdote, case in Baltimore City, a young man I've been working with who was stopped by the police in Baltimore City and had his car seized, his girlfriend's car seized that he was driving, and $3,000 in tax return money that he had on him and had proof that it was from tax return money. 8 o'clock in the evening on a February night in Baltimore. He's traveling one way on the street, the police car with 2 officers in it traveling the other way. As they pass, they test, and it's written in their statement of facts, that they smell marijuana coming from his car. Wintertime, his windows are up, because one window, his driver's side window is broken anyway, windows are up. In Baltimore City, they knew it was coming from his car. So they turned around, eventually stopped the guy a few blocks away, found a partially burnt marijuana cigarette after a thorough search of his car that had not been recently lit, okay? Obviously took that, seized the car, and it took a lot of energy and effort and work from other people to help them get their vehicle back. I don't know if they ever got the money back. So, I mean, that's an example. And so, you know, what I'm saying is, yeah, I mean, police can always try to concoct some story, but it's going to be extremely difficult. I mean, to say, you know, you've been drinking when in fact you weren't drinking. And if you're, you know, no one's car is getting searched as you being stopped for DUIs. Okay? The only reason we will say we're searching your car when we're stopped for if you're stopped for DUI is once we place you under arrest for DUI. And then we go through your car because we're saying we're doing an inventory on your car to protect your car and your property that's in your car as we have your car towed. Really, we're just looking for other things more times than not. So again, you know, marijuana by far is that tool that law enforcement currently uses to search you and your car. I mean, and that's just the way to do it.
There's a decision, and we'll take a break right now, but there was a decision from a California court just last week that said that when a patient showed a cop a medical card, even though the cop smelled marijuana or claimed to, that there was not probable cause to search the vehicle. So I think Neil's right. I think that once it's legal, most judges are probably going to rule that way. But we do have a break scheduled now and until 3:45. So please come back in 10 minutes and join us again. Thank you.
Yeah.